For the past couple of years, companies have spent millions of dollars rolling out generative AI projects, with many of them failing. Now, the thing is that the models were performing relatively fine. A lot of it is just a call to ChatGPT or upgrading to the latest model. But the problem with Gen AI is it's being treated as the default option, essentially. And this means that companies are defaulting to Gen AI without validating that it is the right tool to begin with. And so in many cases, companies end up building solutions that are less reliable and unfortunately more costly. So in this video, let's go through an enterprise example based off of my own deployments of when to not use generative AI, and then let's go through a simple framework of how to decide when and when to not use generative AI going forward. So let's first start with the example. So for context, this is a large company and they're processing millions of transactions. This includes reimbursements, this also includes invoices, there's a lot of laundry listings of what they're trying to validate. And they had two different systems. The first system was what should be charged, and the second one was what was actually paid for. And the problem here was sometimes these numbers don't match. It could have been something as simple as a processing error, it could even go as far as fraud. And so as an example, a transaction could be approved for $1,000, what was actually paid out was $1,200. And that discrepancy is pretty easy if you're a small company with smaller transactions, but the issue really becomes scaling. As you have thousands and millions of these contracts, then this becomes more of a systemic problem that we need to address. Now, there is an immediate instinct here to use generative AI to solve this problem, and the pipeline could look something like this. You use generative AI to parse the documents, then you extract the relevant numbers, then you do the same for the second data source. You compare those values, and then if it doesn't align, you escalate to a human to validate the mismatch. And to be clear, this approach is totally fine on a small scale, but what happens when we increase the amount of transactions? Now, if you're at millions of transactions, you're going to have multiple generative AI calls. You're going to have non-deterministic outputs. If there's a failure, it's going to be more difficult to debug. And then costs are going to scale linearly with the volume. And what's going on here is you are using a probabilistic system to do something that is completely deterministic. And this is why a lot of enterprise AI projects end up failing, because the architecture is off here. And this is why a lot of companies, after they move outside of a POC phase or an initial pilot phase, the ROI isn't worth it anymore because the costs blow up because it wasn't scaled appropriately. Now, I will say the best large-scale systems, for lack of a better term, are essentially very boring systems. And what I mean by this is you should really only put intelligence where it needs to be. So you want to make the core system as simple as possible. And so in this scenario, what can we do instead, and what did we actually do in the project? Well, we realized that one, there was really only a handful of document formats. So rather than having the AI reason every single time it saw a document, we instead just mapped the format to a template. This allowed us to extract values deterministically, and then we can compare numbers directly as well. Now, I will say this does require more upfront field work when defining specific templates and also going through your documents ahead of time to look for some of those edge cases. But once we went into production, the system was way more cheaper and it was obviously faster to run. But I would say more importantly, it was more predictable at scale and the accuracy also was better. Now, I do want to be clear, I don't want to say to not use Gen AI. We actually did use Gen AI for this use case. So we actually did it in the development process. So we used the AI to create new templates. But in a future stage, we could also use the generative AI to handle some of those rare edge cases. And so in this case, instead of escalating to a human if it doesn't match, it would go through the generative AI first, and then it could escalate to a human if the generative AI didn't understand it. And so here, that intelligence is going to be used for edge cases only. Now, before using generative AI, let's just ask a couple of questions. Now, for the first question you should ask yourself, is most of the workflow deterministic? Now, my rule of thumb is if it's probably around 80 plus of the same rules every time, then you might as well just encode it. Now, the second question is, where along your workflow is there actually uncertainty involved? As if you map out this whole system, you'll be able to identify where you may need to use generative AI to pick up some of those uncertain pieces. And I see this a lot with AI agent deployments as well. So instead of deploying AI agents to figure things out every single time, if you build a clear workflow and then insert the intelligence strategically, it'll also help with scale going forward. But the biggest thing I want you to take away from this video is to make sure that you are thinking about not only the initial deployment, but also what it's going to look out at scale, and then how that uncertainty and those costs will rise over time. Because the ROI on a smaller project may not be worth it once you scale it out. And that all unfortunately comes down to some of the architectural decisions that you'll make in the beginning. So anyways, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.